Okay, we are live and good morning, everybody. This is the Senate Transportation Committee, and it is Wednesday, March 9th. We are going to start off our morning talking to Brad Worthen. Brad and I go way back for many years. Brad was a big railroad person, and God, it must have been 20 years ago. Brad, are you with us?
I am, Mr. Chairman, and
Yeah, you remember those days, huh? Well, it must have been 20 years ago.
It was at least, it was 20, it was 2000.
It was 2000, yeah.
22 years ago, the last time I probably testified there in room number 3.
And that's right. I think he's probably got a set of trains at home there now.
Well, I behind here on my credenza at work, I have a Lionel that my dad actually got as a son, as a kid. The Lionel set right there. Yeah. And he got that in the early late 1920s from his father, and he gave it to me when I was a kid. And I came across it when we were cleaning out my parents' house after they passed, and I said, I'm putting that right up here. So
yeah, funny you say that, because when I was probably 10 years old, my grandfather died on Christmas, and my father took me the week after down and picked out a train. And I still have it in the box. And so it's a good memory. You're about the same thing. So yeah, you wanted the railroad up at Swan, right?
The old, which is now the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail there.
That's right.
We worked pretty diligently for a couple of years there, and testified many hours in your Senate. And appreciate all the support you gave back then. And
that was great.
And I'm also, just for the information on the committee members, I'm also vice chair of the Vermont Rail Action Network, and we've been very influential in promoting all sorts of passenger and rail services throughout Vermont and New England, and we're very excited finally to be on that train going south and from Burlington.
Oh boy, I can't wait! I can't wait. We've been working on that since Howard Dean days.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, you
okay. Well, welcome, Brad, and
thank you.
For the record, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we're going to talk. You're going to help us talk about the international airport, and I'll turn it over to Senator Chittenden. And Senator Chittenden, would you like to take the lead right now?
I'll just say a couple of really nice things about Mr. Worthen here. So I came on the South Burlington City Council back in 2015, and in those discussions, I realized some of the history that Brad is so well informed of regarding how the Burlington International Airport, how it has evolved over time in its different governance models and different shifts. And he was working at the airport back in 2000. You'll tell us the times, but he had this one study that kept coming up in a lot of the discussions, which recommended in 2012 or so that the Burlington International Airport, the Strategic Oversight Committee, look into working with the state to study different governance models. So that's where I started. I was introduced to Brad with Kevin Dorn, through Kevin Dorn, and every time I talk to Brad about the airport, he has very interesting and insightful things to say. On this committee, Brad, I've raised the Burlington Airport a couple of times in different conversations over the last year and a half. And I just really welcome your thoughts on where you think the airport is and how the state might help in addressing anything that's either emerging or on the horizon for air travel. And also always happy to talk trains. I love trains, and the committee loves trains. So I'll leave it to the chair as to where you want to steer the conversation, but any of the perspective there would be welcome.
Yeah, I also have some interest in the airport. Always amazed me that it's controlled and run by Burlington, and has very little involvement from surrounding towns. But I haven't been very successful in changing anything. So, Brad, tell us a little bit about what's going on, please.
Thank you, Senator Chittenden and Chairman Mazza, and welcome, greetings, committee members. I just currently I'm vice president of commercial development with Ernie Parmelo Real Estate in Burlington, and that's where I'm talking to you from today. Ernie has been a big advocate for the airport, and as you know, the Air National Guard in promoting the F-35s. Brian Searles, who I'm sure is no stranger to most of you, when he was between Secretary of Transportation Term 1 and Secretary of Transportation Term 2. He actually, for 5 years, was the Director of Aviation at the Burlington International Airport back 10, 12 years ago. And Brian tapped me at that time to be the community facilitator for the airport. And the community facilitator's job was to reach out to the various communities and deal with the issues that were on a daily basis as it relates to airport encroachment, airport noise, airport buyout programs for the homes and whatnot. So I became very familiar with all aspects of the airport. Brian had me integrated with the Airport Commission on a monthly basis. He had me working with the Air National Guard, City of South Burlington particularly, as it relates to the housing program, Part 150 it was called and is called at that time. So I became very familiar with the airport. The airport, prior to Mayor Clavel having a jurisdiction in the city of Burlington, Mayor Clavel, before that, the Airport Commission, which at the time was chaired by the late great Bobby Miller, the Airport Commission actually set the rules and regulations and the direction for the airport. They were appointed by the mayor, but they had autonomous decision-making process. A lot of people started complaining during Clavel's term that the airport noise and everything else, and Clavel decided that based on the jurisdiction he had on all the other department heads within the city of Burlington, that he would bring the airport director of aviation directly under his tutelage. So the Airport Commission became nothing more than a soft sounding board, if you will, for the mayor's office, and that's kind of what it is today. They really don't have, in my mind, a lot of power, even though a very distinguished gentleman, Jeff Munger, is the chair of that committee. So anyway, when Brian left to go to work for the Shumlin administration in his second term as second appointment as a Secretary of Transportation, my services were no longer needed by the gentleman who has just been kicked off as the Director of Aviation due to some indiscretionary activity, as you probably have all read about. At that time, 10 years ago, when I realized that the political jurisdiction that this massive transportation resource has, great economic return to all of Vermont, is under the direction of one political figure. And that, to me, didn't seem to sit right because of the nature. 110 years ago, there was nothing between the current airport and UVM. It was all farmland. So they put the airport out there in the city of South Burlington. And so when that happened, a lot of cities and towns throughout the country were all getting into aviation. And they said, well, as a city, we're going to run the airport. 100 years later, that model has changed significantly throughout the country. And there are many examples where airports have gone from municipal control to a regional authority. So 10 years ago, I brought together Ernie Parmelo, Win Smith from Sugarbush, Frank Coffey from Greater Burlington Industrial Corporation, Bobby Miller, and maybe 2 or 3 other people. And we funded a study, which is the one that Senator Chittenden just referred to, which I know you all have copies of, because actually we created a white paper for Mayor Moreau when he first took office. And that white paper was somehow leaked out. It wasn't supposed to, but it's like old news now, so who cares? But that white paper was funded, the study was funded by a professional airport consultant out of Albany, who did a great job, who had experience with other transitional events from municipal owned to regional airports. And it all made sense then, and it all makes sense now, that the airport is such an economic engine for the whole state that having it controlled by a political appointment, such as the past director of aviation, that was a political appointment. And it lasted for a while, but it all fell apart, as you know. So you have a lot of governance issues, you have economic return issues, you have currently there is as an example, the assistant acting deputy director of aviation is appointed by the mayor. What the city needs to do, but it won't and it can't because of money constrictions, is to go out on the open market nationwide and select a director of aviation that has extensive knowledge about this, running an airport our size. And the restriction is that they're a department head in the city of Burlington, and there is a cap limit on the salary. That salary is in the $110,000 range, I believe. When anybody who's qualified nationwide to run our airport, that salary needs to double. So there's just one example of the restriction that occurs. You have the political restriction that occurs, and it's time for, Mr. Chairman, your committee and the Governor Scott's administration to study again with the city's cooperation. The city of Burlington needs to cooperate in this and discover what can be done to move the airport into a regionalized government authority, which I know we have examples of all over. You know, the Green Mountain Transit, you're familiar with it. So we know we can do this. But the question is that needs to be answered as we go forward is, what benefit does the city of Burlington have for turning this airport over to an authority? And my immediate response to that is, well, the authority doesn't have to buy the land, as an example, where the airport sits. The authority can lease the land. The airport receives a lot of, the majority of the revenue comes from the parking garage. Maybe they retain the parking garage. There's all sorts of opportunities in which to make sure the city of Burlington is whole in this discussion and perhaps a transition from city management to regional authority. I also think, Mr. Chairman, that it's important for the state of Vermont to have a stake in the game. And, you know, I mean, we do a great job. I mean, I'm a private pilot. I've been flying for 40 some odd years. I have an airplane at the airport. Very fortunate to have that. The state-run airports are in really good shape, and we spend a lot of money on them, as you know, and we make a lot of improvements. Fortunately, a lot of that money comes from the FAA, so we're able to accommodate that. But the state of Vermont, Mr. Chairman, has to have a position in this regional airport authority. It can't be just, and that'll come with funding, that'll come with authority, that will come with a greater governance and bringing the whole state to the table rather than just regional players, which in the regional players would be, you know, a member from Williston, a member or two from Burlington, Essex, the surrounding communities that would have voting authority, would actually select the director of aviation, would set policy and priorities for the airport. Sometimes I think the Burlington Airport is an Achilles heel to the city of Burlington because it's a enterprise zone. The only thing the city of Burlington voters have to do is back up any bond issues that occur. Everything else is self-funded through revenues from the airport, either from the airlines or concessions, parking, etc. So again, I think if the committee was to put in motion a bill, and you know, Mr. Chairman, we've all done 100 studies, but with the idea that City of Burlington, Mayor Moreau needs to be a part of the discussion. And so I'll stop at that and answer some questions. I hope that was insightful.
Excellent overview. What's the benefit presently for Burlington? Do they reap a lot of money at the end of the year when all's said and done? I know they have their police department there with 5 or 6 officers. And so what's their bottom line at the end of the year? How much do they make?
I don't know, Mr. Chairman, what the bottom line is. I forget. I haven't, if the finance committee City of Burlington would have that information, but you're correct. I mean, the garage is a big money maker and it's a big revenue maker. And number 2 is actually 10 officers on assignment at the Burlington Airport from the City of Burlington Police Department.
Wow.
My sense is they could probably use those back in the City of Burlington these days. But again, it's, you know, that I knew that when we had discussions years ago about the City of Burlington's police department on site, that was kind of a closed bid situation, which nobody else was actually allowed to look at. Right. And so the city would reap those benefits. And again, the idea is not to take away from the city's revenue line. It is to enhance the operation of the airport and for all Vermonters and a larger economic return and a fair governance process. So I'd be happy to look those numbers up, but I know that the City of Burlington Finance Committee has those. The garage is big, and I know the police department is $300,000-$400,000 a year they get from that. So,
It's fun. It's funny that when they talk about the police department, how critical they need more officers, which they do. They never mention that 10 of them have left not left the department, but are assigned elsewhere.
Yeah.
They never bring that up in a discussion. So
nope.
That's amazing, because if they're down to 50 officers, they're really down to 40, I guess.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Well, I think the 50 are in Burlington, the 10 are extra up there.
Oh, okay.
So, but they're down 20 anyway. So it's like,
yeah.
But again, I don't know much about the policing issue in terms of the logistics, but from a revenue standpoint, this is an area which the City of Burlington somehow needs to be made whole. And whether it's, again, you lease the land from the city or whatever, but it really is time for the state of Vermont and the City of Burlington to engage in a conversation about regionalization.
Okay, I'll open up for questions. Senator Ingalls.
Brad, great presentation, very insightful and
very good.
kind of exciting, actually. What's in it for Burlington to want to go and negotiate with that? If they just say no, we're not going to do that, does it end there?
No, I mean, again, I would hope that based on the current turmoil that's gone on at the airport, politically for the mayor as well, that he doesn't, and the select board, the city council doesn't have that reaction. If they did have that reaction and they weren't going to cooperate, well, everything is public record, and the Senate Transportation Committee and the legislature can order what they want done in terms of a study. But I really feel that it's reaching across the table and saying, maybe with you, Senator Mazza, would be with Moreau would be to say, we need to move this airport forward. Can we do it cooperatively in a study and just look at this one more time or another time and see what the benefit is for Burlington? If Burlington said no, I would still encourage the study, because the fact of the matter, the fact of the matter is, Moreau sat on the commission for years, the airport commission, before he even decided to step into elected politics. And so that's where I got to know Moreau when he was there with Brian Searle's tenure. So Moreau's very familiar with the airport, but politically speaking, it was an appointment that he made, putting Gene Richards in charge of the airport because Gene had done a great job helping to elect Moreau. Simple. That's the simple statement, but that's the fact. So I think that the time is right. Moreau is probably not going to run again. He might, but the cooperative level, if he doesn't cooperate on this particular turn of events, then perhaps the next mayor will, which shouldn't stop you from doing the study, or to find out exactly what is needed to make the city whole now, rather than waiting for a new mayor. So I'm not sure I answered that, Senator Ingalls, directly, but roundabout, there's opportunity for the legislature now, hopefully with the cooperation of the mayor's office.
I'll follow up with some different questions. Senator Chittenden's got his hand raised, so I'm going to let him go.
Go ahead, Senator Chittenden.
Well, so much to your point, Senator Ingalls, and I too, Brad, do not want to take from Burlington. I want to keep them whole. That's absolutely important. And the study, that H52 is a bill that's been out for 4 years or so. It really is not taking or not forcibly doing anything. All it's doing is asking for the mayor, Burlington City Councilor, South Burlington City Councilor, somebody from VTrans, a citizen like yourself, Brad, to just have this conversation to see what Burlington could benefit, similar to what was happened before. To your point, Senator Ingalls, and I think to Senator Mazza, as I've studied this, I have heard from the Finance Committee in previous years that Burlington gets some administrative offset every year. So they get to spread a little bit of the mayor's salary and some HR resources. So since it's an enterprise fund, they got to keep all the money separate, but they get about $350,000 from the airport enterprise fund to spread across city resources. They also get to appoint currently the aviation director, though that hasn't always been the case. So to your direct question, Senator Ingalls, exactly as Brad said, there's a possibility where instead of only being able to justify certain expenses, Burlington could retain ownership of the land and get a lease payment for $500,000 pick a number or $1 million, there is the resources to justify the value of that land. And then they could do with that money whatever they want. They could invest it in Memorial Auditorium. They could invest it in the mall development process. That way they would reap the benefit of their 100-year-ago investment buying a cornfield of 400 acres from South Burlington. But again, not forcing anything. I don't want to take from Burlington. I think the study that you're referring to, Brad Worthen, is just asking them to sit down at a table and look at governance.
Yeah, and
Yes.
Yep. And I can see the difference. I mean, I travel a lot. My friends travel a lot, and I don't want to take away from Burlington. I mean, we would love. I would love. It would be my airport of choice to fly out of Burlington every time that I could, and I applaud them for the great numbers that they had. But there's no direct flights out of there as far as where you want to go. I think that some of that mindset is really spawned Plattsburgh Airport. I mean, because they have those direct flights going to Florida and going all over the country and all of that. And it would be really nice to have some openness about and that thought process. Whatever growth that they had, if they could attract airlines to be in there for whatever reason that they can't, I think that their growth potential is unlimited if they just get some of these direct flights out of Burlington to the rest of the world.
Sure, very good point, Senator. When we hit the wall with particularly with COVID, and then 10 years ago we hit the wall on a couple of other restrictions that occurred. But the growth of the airport is directly related to service, as you're relating to, and we have improved on a number the airport has improved on a number of different direct flights, limited daytime. Limited days during the week, but I know I was talking to someone yesterday and they were looking at it on American airline flies direct to Miami on Saturdays and back, all good times, and it's like $325 round trip and coach, but there is need for improvement. I also think that once we get through this COVID, 40% I forget what the event was happened 10 years ago. What was the event happened 10 years ago, Tom, when service went all to pieces? I can't remember. I got COVID brain here. I had it a couple of weeks ago. But the fact is that 40% of the airport traffic was directly related to Canadians. And yes, and that was eroded and was being eroded 10 years ago by Plattsburgh. Plattsburgh's struggling at the moment with service. Because of COVID, because it shut the border down, because they were 80% or more over there Canadian traffic. So we've got some more growth to rebuild once the border opens up even more. But I was encouraged to see a bunch of Canadian cars around last weekend here in the area. So there is opportunity. The airport, the study that I helped do 10 years ago on airport expansion. You go out to the airport now, they're building a whole south and a new terminal, going to streamline the TSA activities. So you go through one line only, easy access to both north and south terminal, new gateways, jetways for jets and passenger service. So it is growing, but it could do better. And the reason it could do better, again, was that if you bring a nationally recognized director of aviation at the proper salary level, who has all the connections to all the airline decision makers, to the industry in whole. One of the problems right now with trying to recruit someone under the direction of the city of Burlington is, as I said, the salary is one, but number two, the city of Burlington, as it relates to the police department having trouble recruiting a new chief of police, the reputation of the airport and its governance is out there globally, nationwide. And I do talk to a number of consultants on a regular basis. I get updates every day, email-wise, to what's happening activity-wise, the top headlines globally on airport activity. So we have a reputation. We have a reputation that is parallel to the city of Burlington chief of police. It's the same in the aviation industry. We're not going to be able to recruit anybody to come and run this airport who has proper credentials and experience due to salary and city reputation of oversight of the airport. Not a good combination. So it confines us right now. It confines us a lot. And there's great talent out there. And as we all know, everybody and their brother wants to move to Burlington or to Vermont because of the COVID, the safe haven that COVID has provided all of us up here.
Crystallize that point right now, if I may, Chair Mazza.
Go ahead. Yep.
So to crystallize that point, anybody that you hire right now is going to be at the whim of the mayor. And if Mayor Weinberger is not there in a year and a half, so that's going to factor into any potential candidate. But back to the police and the contracting. This also came up during the Burlington Telecom concerns when the city of Burlington's credit rating was being downgraded because of the conflicts over that. And that was affecting the airport's credit rating. So the separation that we used to have with the regional, with the airport governing body, not the regional, but the airport governing body making the decisions, hiring and evaluating the aviation director, put more of the decisions at arm's length, sheltering them from the political headwinds of Burlington. So that's why I think it's just worth having this conversation, looking the next 10 years out, whoever the next mayor is. This will take one less thing off of the plate of the mayor of Burlington so they can focus on all the things within their city, and the region could focus on the air if the committee, in fact, suggested that they go further with that step.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I know in the past that you've authorized studies and whatnot, and I was on one of those many years ago for you when we were studying the likelihood of Burlington service, Amtrak or train service down to Schenectady. I would urge the committee and to perhaps, Mr. Chairman, I'm not familiar with the bill, but is there a monetary figure attached to it in which you can provide $50,000 as an example to do a study by several reputable, and again, I have several people in mind, but they have to apply obviously for it, but people who are knowledgeable about regionalization and they have track records. Again, all the things that Senator Chittenden has talked about in terms of documentation was created by a key consultant who Brian helped recommend, Brian Searles, and when he was director of aviation, because he knew the need for this to happen. And so the point is that there are capable individuals out there that have done this for many airports across the country, and that have helped pave the way for regionalization. And the end result is you've got a much fairer, non-myopic governance process in place for the airport and benefiting all, including improved air service that Senator Ingalls talked about. It's the same. It's all comes together. Right now, right now the acting director of aviation. His experience came from 10 years under the past director of aviation, who has a less than worthy track record, political appointment. So we're kind of in this rut, and I'm not taking anything away from the acting director because he's there filling the job, but we need to elevate the position, and we need to elevate it through the regional authority making a non-political selection of a director of aviation.
Brad, what could we do as a committee? I really, this has been really helpful because something that's been on my mind for years. And in fact, many years ago, they were getting $1 million out of the state. I was able to cut it to $500,000. But what can we do? What could we do to get this thing moving? How do we form? How do we go about this? If this committee is so desired, what can we do?
Well, again, I mean, you have the power to create a bill or to enhance a bill to recommend to the committee and to the Senate and then the House. Outlining some of the things that we've talked about today, the reason why this should take place, having some background justification. And again, Mr. Senator Mazza, you're in a position of long-term longevity and have connections. I would call the mayor's office and I would say, Moreau, we want to see if this makes sense at this point. So I'm going to move a bill through the committee and the chamber to authorize a study on the subject. I want your cooperation in doing this. It's not a hostile takeover. It's not a financial downfall for the city. It is a cooperative reaching across the table to see if it makes sense. I
Would it have
know,
to be the city council to approve it, or would the mayor?
that's a good question. I think it's a cooperative thing. Thomas, I don't know if that would be require the council or not, but the city council. But again, I think the city council is, more progressive than ever. And this is a progressive enclosure, if you will, or accompaniment of towns and cities around that would affect both towns and cities around the airport. And again, I think that the thing for Senator Mazza, the committee to think about is that the state of Vermont needs to have a stake at the table in a regionalized process. You have to be there, whether it's a figurehead at the table or whether you're putting that $1 million or $10 million back into the airport, whatever it is. This is Vermont's largest transportation hub. And at the height, we had 1.5 million passengers coming and going out of that airport in a year. And it's getting back to that. It's a big economic engine. So I'm not sure, Senator Mazur, I answered your question directly, but proposal from your encompassing what I've just said from your committee, I think is needed. It's needed.
We certainly want to make some progress. Like I said, we've talked about it for many years, and it just seemed that we just don't know what direction to take. But this has been so helpful because it gets right down to the nuts and bolts of this whole issue, and it sounds like it could be workable. Any questions, Senator Kitchell or Senator Ingalls? Senator Perchlik, any questions? I know we've taken.
I have a question.
Sure, right ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if it's for Mr. Worthen or for Senator Shipman. And has the state been involved? I know we don't own the airport, obviously, and we're focused on the state-owned airports, but would there be a role for Agency of Transportation in this study? Have they had a role in the past?
Well, we do fund some of it. We give them some money, so I think we have a role. But that's my opinion. I don't know. Jane, do you know?
Yeah, I think we have a $500,000 that we
$500,000.
have.
It used to be $1 million, and we got
Yeah.
it cut to $500,000 because I was so upset that they wouldn't, the way it was being operated, that we're able to cut $500,000. I know it's not a big deal because they're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars, but I thought it would get some attention, but it didn't work very well. So.
But that's the only role for AOT at this point?
Right.
Work closely with the airport.
Except it's a lot of money is a pass through to the airport, to that airport, and the same is true with other municipal being an MPO. So there's a number of areas where it's more a pass through. I think where we always got, and maybe this is where we need to do some research in terms of the history or other airports that have grown over time and sort of have been, the governance has been changed in response to the growth and to the economic benefit. I think, there's been a great concern about sort of the property owned by the city of Burlington and just that whole relationship that made it so unique. But it seems like it's been talked about in the comments about the administrative and the politicization and so forth is it's something that I think is maybe a new dimension that we haven't really focused on before.
Chair Mazza.
Yes, go ahead.
And the state derives monies from the airport from rooms and meals, primarily as far as what the restaurants do in there, or is there a surcharge on tickets, or do we derive any monies out of that other than rooms and meals?
I think so.
I believe, Mr. Chairman and Senator Ingalls, it's rooms and meals as it relates to the state. Of course, you also then need to take into account the economic return that the Air Guard provides.
Right. Yeah.
And through payroll taxes, everything else there. Yeah. So that's a big part of it. And the other thing is that the city of Burlington, because of the Air Guard, as we all know, but doesn't have to have a crash and rescue team on the airport because that's supplied by the Air National Guard, and that saves several $1 million a year alone to to the city. So, which again would stay in place as a regionalization because of the Air Guard's presence. But to answer, I'm sorry, the other senator down there at the end. Yes,
Yeah.
sorry, sorry I haven't met you before, but hopefully will do. I think that answering your question about bringing VTrans to the table in this discussion, to me, the answer is yes, because bringing as many players as you can to the table to have the discussion, then you're not blindsiding anybody. And of course, they do have an airport division, and that division may involve may have a seat at the table with the regionalization chair committee. So inclusion is better than not. So I'd urge all interested parties to be at the table. And this is again as it relates to the study. I don't think, and again, the study should be conducted by an independent consultant, not by us. That's where, Mr. Chairman, I go back to funding, putting funding in the bill, if you create a bill for this, so that you have some teeth in it to go out and hire someone.
Chair Mazza?
Yes, go ahead.
As a next step, if you'd be open to it, Senator Mazza, is H52 exists, and it really is speaking to what we're now circling, a composition of the committee, the charge, a very soft, just go look at governance. Maybe I could ask Anthea to propose that as an amendment for the T-bill, and then we can also, if I can reach out to Mayor Weinberger, and see if you want to speak to it. Is that a possible next step?
Great.
Okay.
That's a start. We'll see what the committee says, but that's a start. And I think it's time we do it. We put it off long enough, and if we don't try, we'll never know if we succeed or not. Right. Yes, Brad?
And Mr. Chairman, I have had several discussions with your counterpart in the House, and she is aware of the same.
Oh, really? Oh, good.
Yeah,
Good,
yeah.
Good.
Well, she serves on my Vermont Rail Action Network Board of Directors. So we cross lines all the time going between trains and planes. So it's
okay.
but she's aware of it, and I'd welcome the discussion with her committee to committee, because she gets it, and I'm just like I think your committee does too.
Boy, you've been very, very good this morning on this issue, because we needed someone like yourself to help us.
I'm always interested in the airport. It's been it's been a great, it was a great experience for me, and I was always excited about helping the airport out, as I am today. So
you got a hangar for your plane out there?
I lease one.
Okay, because we're trying to put some around the state, different hangars.
Well, that is in fact a critical shortage for the growth of general aviation, and general aviation has an important part in economic return to the state. Just from people flying in all over and spending their dollars, whether they're tourists or not. We have a huge deficit in hangar space for general aviation, not only at the state airports, but in Burlington. And this has been one of the issues that a group of us have brought to the attention of the city council, that over the past 10 years, we've had a lot of lip service from the director of aviation's position about adding hangar space and how they were going to do it, et cetera, and nothing has happened, zero. So we've taken a little bit more aggressive stance to that, because the airport needs to grow in all facets, and general aviation is a part of that. So it's a concern. Whatever you can do for the state-owned airports to increase hangar opportunities only means a better economic return for those communities.
Is there growth? Is there room for growth in Burlington? They got the space to grow? Yes,
they do. They're developing the south end of the field there off of Williston Road is where they're planning to put the Beta facility, a couple 100,000 square feet. The thing is huge. But there are opportunities. The FAA provides funding for airport facilities such as maintenance garages and terminals and taxiways and runways. They don't supply money though they don't have money available for general aviation hangar space. But there is an opportunity for the airport to apply for a brand new maintenance facility, have that built on a section of the airport that's now available. It's up along the north end of the runway along Airport Drive, where they bought all those homes. I mean, we bought almost 200 homes, I think, over the course of the past 15 years. So you have this large opening there that could accommodate that. There's space on the field for growth. But again, I think the previous director didn't realize the value of general aviation, and we got a lot of lip service and no action. So, but we're moving on that. So whatever, again, the committee can do to influence the state airports and their ability to build hangars would be significant for all general aviation throughout the state. And again, the economic return that comes with it.
Good. Any other questions at this time? Well, we got a good ideas of what to do, and I hope we continue to do it. This is our opportunity to try it. I'll do anything I can, and I'm sure that we'll talk about the committee and see what we can do. But I thank you for your time this morning, Brad. It was really, really beneficial to us. It's an interesting subject, and this I know a hell of a lot more than I did going into this, because it's a very interesting discussion, but nobody ever talks about it.
Yeah. Well, and again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to help in any way I can, as I always have. I always enjoy testifying in Senate Transportation.
That's good.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you very much again, Brad. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, Brad. Nice to meet you.
See you later, Senator. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
And
Okay. That was very, very
that
good.
age 52 that Tom, that you sent hits it right on the head. That's the avenue that we need to get started with that.
It has it's just the members writing the report. So if you wanted to hire an expert, that's not in there. Seemed like what he was suggesting, but maybe the members of the committee can do it.
Yeah, I hope we can put something together that, like I said, if it's not that, and I'm glad to hear the House has heard somewhat about it. That's really helpful. So I think we can make some progress. I'm very excited. Like I said, I'll do what I know Senator Chittenden will. So let's keep this moving, and whatever you have to do with Anthea, or I'll be glad to talk to the House chair or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. We're going to move to our next item, and we'll certainly discuss this as we get to T-bill over here. Our next item, excuse me, this morning is bicycle safety. Jeannie, would you let our guest in, please? They're probably on.
They're in, Senator. They're in the room, Senator.
There are, okay. Our next item this morning from the Senate Transportation Committee is bike safety, and we've discussed a little bit about this in a few weeks. It's been a concern of mine to make sure that we do have safe traveling with bikes. We're doing the most we can with bike lanes throughout Vermont. But as we get more into bikes, which is good news, and we're getting more into electric bikes, okay, who's our first guest this morning? Excuse me. Karen, Locomotion, I guess, right?
Hi there.
Oh, hi there.
I was just here a couple weeks ago, but just to refresh,
Yep.
I'm the executive director of Locomotion.
Okay.
I want to thank Chairman Mazza and all of you for having us back. And I also really want to thank Jeannie for the amount of help that she gave us getting set up with this. I appreciate her efforts. I was invited before to answer your questions about bike safety. And I think it's clear, and has been in my tenure here with this organization, which has only been 4 years, that both the chairman and this entire committee is really looking for the same thing that Locomotion has been looking for, which is actions that can help keep vulnerable users safe on the roads, whether it's people who bike or people who walk. I really applaud that effort, and I appreciate, with all the millions of things you guys could be focused on, that you're focusing on this. I brought 2 colleagues with me this time. These are the experts. I sort of play one on TV, if you will, but I really sometimes need the people that do this work day in and day out. And they'll introduce themselves in a minute, but I brought them to talk about how we think about how we think about safety for all our users on the road and how that's changing. And it's changing pretty fast, I think. And that means the actions we need to take are changing as well. And so based on a framework that is used by some federal agencies, Jonathan Weber, who's on the call here, who is our Complete Streets manager, is going to walk through a bike safety approach that can be, that approaches that can make a difference, but using a framework that the federal agencies use more and more. And Mary Catherine Graziano, who I think most of you have met as well in the past, who's our Senior Manager of Education and Safety, is here to help answer questions related to her area of expertise. She knows the world of safety quite deeply. And I think what we have to say will help you all as you grapple with priorities that the Senate, or well, the state actually can take to keep not just people who bike and walk safe on the roads, but really all people. So I'm going to hand this over to Jonathan. He's got a presentation prepared. I believe that you all have a copy of it as well. I think he's probably going to share his screen. It's a quick presentation. I think it'll give you that framework I was describing and just a slight different way to think about what are those things that keep bikers and walkers safe on the roads. I can hear us all grappling with, like, there's a lot of different things we can do, but this will help you prioritize those, I believe. So I'm handing that off to him. And then at the end, we'll have a chance to ask, you'll have a chance to ask some questions. Mary Catherine can put a finer point on some of the things that Jonathan talks about.
Okay, thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you, Karen. And I'm going to go ahead and share here. You all seeing that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Great, so thank you, senators, for having us here today. We are here to talk about, as Karen said, how to make our roads safer and our streets safer for people walking and biking and really all users. So Karen gave some quick introductions. I'm Jonathan Weber. I'm the Complete Streets Program Manager. You heard from Karen, our Executive Director, and Mary Catherine Graziano is also here. She's our Senior Manager for Education and Safety Programs. And Locomotion's mission is to make it safe, accessible, and fun for everyone to bike, walk, and roll in Vermont. Sorry, I just need to turn off my phone there. So that's who we are. That's our mission. And I want to sort of start with sort of some core values for us, and I hope these are values that you share. You know, we think that streets and roads are for all Vermonters, and that includes all the, you know, people walking, people using wheelchairs and assistive devices, people driving, and you know, it's important to remember that we are all these different road users at different points in the day and different points throughout our life. We're not going to be able to drive until we're, you know, 100 years old, and we can't drive when we're kids. So we need to think about how the transportation system serves all users, and we should acknowledge that right now it doesn't serve all users all that well. You know, there are lots of examples of situations like the photo on the left, that's Isle of Vermont, where you have no sidewalk, no space for people to walk along the side of the road safely. And that sets up some pretty dangerous situations in a lot of places. So we're going to talk about how to address that. So when we talk about safety on our streets and in any sort of hazardous situation, which streets and roads are potentially hazardous, it's important to start with some inherent human characteristics, right? So we're vulnerable. Our bodies are not capable of being hit by a car and coming out the other side in good shape for the most part. And we make mistakes, right? Even the best trained drivers, the best trained cyclists or walkers make mistakes. I'm a pretty well-educated biker, a pretty well-educated driver, and I make mistakes out there on the road. So what makes our roads dangerous? What makes them hazardous? So we're going to sort of remove the idea of fault in a crash and who's at fault. What makes the roads dangerous for humans is pretty much always the presence of cars, right? The mass of the car and the acceleration of the car's speed is what results in force that does damage to a human body. So if there's no car, there's generally no damage done, right? And we're removing the question of fault from this situation just to sort of isolate the hazard on our roadways for human beings. So again, just emphasizing that speed really is at the core of a lot of this hazard. This chart is showing pedestrian injuries at different impact speeds. As speeds go up, the likelihood of severe injury or death increases. This is true for not just pedestrians, but also for people biking and people driving, right? As speeds go up, the hazard increases as well. So the hierarchy of controls is something that I think OSHA sort of pioneered, but it's being integrated into transportation safety and planning. And what the hierarchy of controls is really about is making any hazardous situation, any hazardous environment safe for humans. Again, acknowledging that humans are vulnerable, we make mistakes. So how do we make a hazardous environment safe, knowing those things? So this upside down pyramid on the left, you see it starts at the top with elimination, that would be the most effective, and then down at the bottom are the less effective controls or countermeasures. So I'm going to run through these and sort of talk about how they would apply to our transportation system. So elimination at the top, that would mean totally eliminating the hazard from the situation. So in an eliminated, there would be no cars, right? So that would be an environment like Church Street or the bike path, where there just are no cars, and so the cars don't pose a hazard to people. Elimination is hard to achieve, right? It's very effective, but very hard to achieve. Substitution is a situation in which we substitute cars or the hazard for a less hazardous version. So that could be moving people to transit, right? Buses, there would be less cars out on the roads, that would be good. Buses generally operate pretty safely. We could also think about lighter cars, since we're reducing the mass of the vehicle and that force times acceleration equation. We could think about lower cars, since a car that's lower doesn't hit a person where their vital organs are, where the head is, and so it poses a lower risk. And we could think about cars that are regulated to be slower. So again, looking at that equation, reducing the acceleration reduces the hazard. Substitution, also fairly difficult to do for us at the state level. It's something that the CPSC would have to look at for car production to change the way that cars are designed, for example. Engineering controls are very effective, and they're something that we have a lot of control over at the state level. So that would be looking at things like separation and protection of people, of the vulnerable people from the hazard. So you would look at separated bike lanes, separated sidewalks. That would be physical separation protection. You can also look at temporal separation protection. So at an intersection, how do we separate users of the intersection in terms of the time during which they're in the intersection? And you can also look at engineering methods to reduce speed on roads. And speed is really key, and road design does largely decide speed. It's why when we get on I-89, we don't need to know what the speed limit is to know that it's safe to go 65 or so miles an hour. And by the same coin, we don't need to see a speed limit to know when we're in a village or a downtown that we shouldn't be going 65 miles an hour. So road design does dictate speed, and engineering to control speed is a really good countermeasure to reduce hazard. Now, when we get down to the close to the bottom of this pyramid, the less effective controls, we're looking at administrative controls. Those are things like policy and education in an effort to create behavior change. We do that, we work on that. It's not all that effective when we really want to reduce hazards, because no matter how much education we do, what our laws are, humans are always going to make mistakes. So there's always that vulnerability. And then at the very bottom, you've got personal protective equipment, things like helmets, reflective vests. Again, they're not super effective. So this is really the core of what the FHWA, the Federal Highway Administration, is adopting now as its traffic safety approach. I'm going to read this quote. The key focus of the safe system approach is to reduce death and serious injury through design that accommodates human mistakes and injury tolerances. So they're talking about using engineering to make the transportation safe, the transportation system safe for humans that make mistakes and are vulnerable to injury. So it's all about engineering. This slide is going to sort of detail how that gets sort of operationalized in a policy sense. So the former approach on the left, the safe system, the new FHWA approach on the right. So in the former approach, we really sought to prevent crashes. The safe systems approach still seeks to prevent crashes, but the priority is to ensure that those crashes that happen, because they're going to happen, don't end in death and serious injuries. The former approach spent a lot of time on improving behavior, again, through policy, through education. The safe systems approach acknowledges that it's an extremely steep uphill battle. There are always new humans being made. Existing humans are always forgetting things, and we always make mistakes. So if we want to have a safe system, we've got to design for human mistakes and have a system that's still going to be safe, even for humans that make those mistakes. The former approach sought to really control speeding through speed limits and enforcement of those limits. The safe systems approach, it acknowledges that we've got a limited number of police officers, and we really need to prevent speeding by design. So use the engineering of the roadway to prevent drivers from speeding in the first place, instead of relying on enforcement and education and public service announcements to get people to slow down. Individuals were held responsible in a lot of cases in the former approach, not necessarily from a legal standpoint, but in terms of how we thought about safety. The safe systems approach really focused on sort of our collective responsibility from the top, looking at engineers and policy and planning, all the way down to, yes, the individual, but it's not just the individual, it's throughout. It's the way the roadway is designed and planned as well as first response too. And then finally, the former approach is very reactive based on crash history. We look at heat maps and then target areas where there were a lot of crashes. The safe systems approach, it still does that, but it's also more proactive. So we look at types of infrastructure that tend to be associated with high rates of crashes, and the system seeks to address those infrastructures wherever they exist, regardless of whether or not there's a history of crashes in each location. So an example would be, crosswalks that cross more than 2 lanes of traffic are consistently very dangerous for people walking. And so a safe systems approach would seek to address those crosswalks that cross multiple lanes of traffic, regardless of whether or not there's a crash history at any individual one. Sorry, I skipped ahead there. So I'm going to go through, we're coming to the end here, but I'm going to quickly go through what this looks like sort of on streets for people walking and biking. So when you apply that safe systems approach to create an environment that's safe for people walking and biking, what does that look like sort of on the street and with different car speeds mixed in? So a shared space environment, this is some of the best places in the world that we love to go visit on vacation, cities in Europe. Provincetown, Massachusetts is used the example here. You could also think about the intersections of Church Street where streets that do have cars cross over. These are places where speeds are 0 to 15 miles an hour. And in these environments, people can walk and bike and share the road with people driving very safely. You can have people in the roadway, cars moving behind them, around them, in front of them, and it's very safe. And these tend to be also very economically productive places. A low speed street, this includes a lot of our residential areas in Vermont, as well as, some of our more built up village centers and downtowns. Cars really need to be going no faster than 25 miles an hour. And as long as cars are moving that speed or less, painted bike infrastructure, so painted bike lane is often sufficient, but you still, protection for that bike lane is really still desirable. For people walking, sidewalks are really key in these environments, and you want to have short crossings on the street. So people walking shouldn't have to cross more than 2 lanes of traffic, and 20 feet should really be like the max crossing distance. On a moderate speed street, so we're sort of scaling up, speeds are going higher, maybe up to 35 miles an hour. Volumes are probably higher in terms of traffic volumes. In this kind of environment, you definitely need to have protection for the bike infrastructure. So that could look like the posts or the little bumps that you see in this image. And And people walking, again, certainly need sidewalks, and you really need to look at the crossings to make sure that those are enhanced, whether that's with, you know, the rapid flashing beacons that are pretty popular now, the flashing lights that a person crossing can activate before they step into the street, roundabouts, signal control to ensure that there's sufficient time for a person to cross the street before cars start to move. And then on our roads and highways, you know, this is sort of a bucket for anything 35 miles an hour or over, typically multiple lanes, often pretty high volumes. For a person biking or walking, the infrastructure really needs to be fully separated from the roadway. So definitely, you know, people biking cannot be on the same side of the curb as people driving. They really need to be on the other side, and that degree of separation needs to increase as speeds and volume go up. And then at intersections, again, a lot of attention needs to be paid to how to create that physical and temporal or sort of time separation, whether that's, you know, with a roundabout, with signal timing, pedestrian islands, so there's sort of a break for a person in the middle of the road, so they only have to cross one lane at a time. But intersections are really key in addition to that fully grade and protected separation. So looking at Vermont and sort of to guide the start of our conversation here, you know, what can be done to make people walking and biking safer here in Vermont? We're really going to have sort of three key recommendations for you that could be looked at as part of the upcoming T-bill. The first is to increase funding for VTrans, the Bike and Pedestrian Grant Program. So this is really a key source of funding for municipal projects that improve infrastructure for biking and walking. So that could be new sidewalks, it could be new bike lanes, it could be improvements to crosswalks. This program is typically funded at around $4 million a year, and requests for funding for this program are typically double that every single year, and they've been that way for a long time. So we'd really like to see that $4 million be bumped up to $8 million or so, but it needs to be really increased to at least match the demand that's coming from communities. You know, these are projects that have gone through a community planning process. They've been approved by select boards. So these are things that the communities want to see installed, and funding is really the major barrier. So we'd like your help in addressing that. We'd also like to see an update to the Vermont state standards. I think the original standards that we're still working with were written in 1995. So I was 4 years old when those were written. I can't think of a whole lot of documents that are still useful that are that old. So they need to be updated so that they really incorporate this safe systems approach, as well as the complete streets approach, smart growth standards. All of that should really be incorporated so that we're building a transportation system that works for Vermonters now and in the future.
Mr. Chair, could I ask a question? The Vermont state standards that you're referencing here, who promulgated those standards? What agency? Was it AOT? I'm just not. In other words, if you say they need to be updated, I'm just saying I haven't got a clue who issued them in the first place, much less where I would go to say update them. So that's my question.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Kidgel. That it is an AOT document. They're in charge of those standards, and basically what they've done over time is added these sort of they call them highway safety design and engineering instructions. And they're supplemental documents to the state standards. So what they have now is this one document that is the state standards, and then there's a website page that has, I don't even know how many of these supplemental guides. And so it creates a lot of space for potential confusion, and you know, in addition to that, as I said, it would be really good to update these to incorporate modern standards for safety and for infrastructure for people walking and biking, as well as smart growth. Did I answer your question there?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. And then finally, sort of our final thing here is we'd really like to see more funding go to transit. You know, if we're going to make a just climate transition and reduce our use of motor vehicles, transit is really key. It is one of the fundamentals for an equitable transportation system. And right now, our transit agencies are really struggling. GMT just put in place some significant service cuts here in Chittenden County. So we'd really like to see our transit agencies supported at a higher level. So thank you so much for your attention here. And we've got Mary Catherine with us, as well as Karen. I'll be sticking around, and we are more than happy to take questions and discuss all this with you.
Okay, I have a question. It gets back to the question I've asked for some time. If a young person, 14 years old or 15 years old, goes out and buys a new bicycle today or electric bike, what are they told of the rights of the highway are? This is important because we keep talking about what we can do for bike lanes, and I agree we're doing that with the Agency of Transportation, but what is told to someone buying a bike or to get out on the highways? What's the rules of the road? What do they understand before they're out there traveling? Are they allowed to travel with traffic? Are they allowed to go down to the intersections in Williston or Taft Corners or wherever? So is there any training before they have that bicycle on the road?
Thank you. That's a really great question.
I've asked it for many years and I can't get an answer. So I'm really interested to find out what's happening here. Because I support bicycles and I support electric bikes. But to me, there's going to be some standard before you enter the highway at 12 years old or 13 or 14 or 18, doesn't make any difference. But and we have that with automobiles, not that I want to license bikes, but on the other hand, there's going to be a cooperation between drivers of cars and bicyclists. And I don't know what they're told to do before they can ride that bike. Thank you.
Excellent question. So Locomotion runs a program called Bike Smart, which is available to children, any schools and even summer programs in the state. And they get, the teachers are trained by us on our Bike Smart curriculum, which has two major components. The first component is how to handle your bike so that, when you start, you don't have those wobbly starts that can actually, cause you to, wobble into traffic if you are not a confident biker. So giving those skills so that if you are riding on the road, you're not veering into traffic, how to look behind you for cars without taking that handlebar with you to bring it right into the car you were looking for. But also the other piece of the curriculum are the rules of the road and how to handle things like intersections, where to ride in traffic, how to handle a hazard in the roadway, all those kinds of things. Now, children are children, and as Jonathan pointed out, humans make mistakes, and children make more mistakes even than adults. So again, we can educate kids, and we do educate kids. We have a delivered program in every Vermont county, over 70 Vermont towns, and at this point, over 300,000 collective training hours to kids. We only have 4 trailers though, and of course there's only so much we can do with 4 trailers. But the thing that would keep kids safe on the roadways is, again, creating spaces where they can get to the places they want to go on their bikes safely. Cars are bigger now, they're faster, there's more of them. We let them go at unsafe speeds in residential areas. So these are where those conflicts occur between a young child and somebody driving a motor vehicle.
But how does that answer my question? If I was to go out, even myself, who's not familiar with the laws of the roads, if I bought a bicycle today, I can ride that bike if I don't want to take any course or anything. There's nothing that tells anyone they have to take a course, right?
Right. There are no laws in Vermont.
So how does a biker know, unless they take one of your courses, you are turning that biker loose, even an electric bike, onto traffic, not knowing what the laws of the bikes are on the highway? That's my concern, right?
Right, of course. So there is no universal curriculum or anything provided, and that would be an agency of education ask, which was a great idea. I would love to see like curricula presented in every school in the state for sure. And again, we don't have any control over out-of-state folks either, right? And a lot of the people on our roadways are from Canada or from other states in the US. And again, those folks aren't trained either. One of the things that helps people, again, our road rules in Vermont are different from those in other states, but the way our roads are designed helps people understand what they're supposed to do, even if they are moving from state to state or they're in a different country or they're from a different country. Our road infrastructure does not give people those same cues, right? So if you're walking on a sidewalk and the sidewalk disappears, what do? Where do you walk? So one of the ways we teach people in cars what to do, even if they haven't been trained, is by those cues we give with the way the roadways are designed.
So there is, again, there's no specs that, for example, if you bought an electric motorcycle, you have to get a license. If you buy an electric bike, there's nothing required. You can take that bike and travel anywhere you want with traffic. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And again, when we train people on a car, we teach them when they're kids, and then we don't ever teach them again, right? So the last time we teach a person who drives a car is when they're about 16 or 17, and then rules change, laws change, situations change, right? We have a new passing rule, for safe passing rule. A lot of people aren't aware of it. So what people do is they know how to handle our roadways because of the cues of the ways the roadways are designed. So yes, you're right. There is no universal training for people on bikes. And also, there's also no universal training for the people who drive either. So once you have a license in Canada, you can drive in the US.
Yeah,
and
you pass the test to get that license. Everyone has to take a test to get that license.
and the contents of those tests are different.
Yeah, I mean, this is because an electric bicycle is 20 miles an hour, I understand. Is that correct? So
Or
20
35.
or 30, what, 35? So you're out in traffic, not knowing one thing about the rules of the highway. Zero. You bought that bike, you take it out on the highway, you move with traffic, and you don't know. You can be 12 years old or 10 years old. Doesn't make any difference.
Mr. Chair, doesn't this raise the question? I guess the question we're struggling with is there isn't any requirement at this point.
That's correct.
And so the question, I guess, as legislators, we have to ask, should there be, as we're seeing the growth of the use of bicycles, as we see e-bikes expand, and we're in a different world than we were, years ago, probably when you went to school, Mr. Chair, there weren't a whole lot of, we all jumped on our Schwinns and single, speed and pedaled to school. But I think the question then is, do you feel that in fact, in light of the expansion and the future of, and a goal of increased use of bicycles for commuting and for other purposes, should there be some, in this case, should the legislature act to put in requirements around training, and under what conditions and for whom? I guess that's really.
All I know is that safety is number one. How are you going to follow safety? For example, I was following a bike just 2 days ago, and it came to a red light, and the bike just continued on through. Well, we're going to have accidents now. That biker should have known that they have to stop if they're in a traffic lane.
And they could be picked up because of that.
Can they? I don't know if they can get a ticket.
Yeah, I think they can.
Yeah, they can. It is against the law to run a red light in Vermont as bicyclists. So
they can't take their license away from them. They don't have one.
Well, they can get ticketed. It's the problem here, right, is this is an enforcement area, right? And law enforcement have limited resources to do that kind of enforcement.
So I want to go back to my question. are there other states that have grappled with this and put in certain requirements? When you're talking about, particularly the roadway uses, and because we know that right now there's nothing. The question is, and looking to the future, do you anticipate, would you recommend? You probably aren't going to recommend, but ultimately the action would have to be taken by the legislature to put in any requirements that are viewed as necessary to ensure the safety of the cyclist, ensure knowledge of the rules, etc. So that would be my question. Are there states that have actually, or I guess in certain countries, certainly Netherlands, the use of cycling is in city traffic. So can you tell us, have any other states attempted to grapple with the concern that the chair keeps bringing forward, and that is how do we ensure that people have the knowledge, skills to be safe, when using, particularly when they're using roadways, when they're using the public road system?
Yeah, so I can get back to you about any lists of states that do it. From my recollection, one of the challenges to bike registration is the admin costs. So in order to set those all together, it's an additional burden.
No, I wasn't talking about bike registration. I was talking about some kind of certification around a certain, that the person, like hunter safety. We have hunter safety, for example, and courses, and then you get a certification. We have it for boat safety. You have to go through a course. And I guess that's really what the chair is asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So in say the Netherlands, they have in their schools, they have a fairly universal education component where kids all learn how to ride safely. So it's just part of the educational component. In terms of, licensure, again, when you mentioned the hunting licenses, that's a really good example. We have a separate branch of people are not hunting illegally without a license. So all of this stuff does come with inherent costs. And it's something we need to decide if that's where we want to put our resources, or if our resources should go to areas where it would result in true safety gains, which I will repeat, our infrastructure.
But infrastructure doesn't enter the picture when someone is out on a bike at night with no lights on the back. They're wearing dark clothing. They should have lights on the back. They should have lights on the front. So, these things are, they're very, very important for safety, but yet we allow them to do it. And if you ride down the road at night and there's a bike in front of you, why don't they have a tail light? Why don't they wear effective clothing?
We do have some laws around that.
Yes, we do
already.
Correct.
The question is,
You have to have a tail light on a bike?
No, it's the law in Vermont. It's a statewide. Sorry, Senator Kitchell. Yeah. The light in Vermont, the light has to be in front and a rear reflector. In some municipalities like Burlington, it's both a front and rear light is required.
And why aren't they using their hand signals? Because bikers don't use hand signals. They just don't. They don't at all. And they had some of these programs before. I was in Montpelier from 72 to 70, or from 72 to 76. And we had to go before you could ride a bike, and maybe it was something that Montpelier did, but we had to go before you could ride on the streets. You had to go to a safety program, and you had to get certified, and they gave you a little license plate, and you put on the back of your bike, and before you could ride in traffic, you had to pass that course. So it's been done before. I just think it's been gotten away from.
Oh, absolutely. I've heard about that program. It would be interesting to find out why it was discontinued. I wonder, because it is no longer continued, and I'm sure there's a reason for that.
Sure, Melissa.
Yes, go ahead.
So thank you for this presentation. I just want to pick up on Senator Kitchell's comment there. And from the testimony that was given to us by some public officials, public safety officers, there's been some real tragic incidents where kids are out in the roadways and they've gotten hurt. I agree that it seems like a logistical nightmare to require people to get a bicycle license, but I, as one senator, do see value in us making clear that anybody under the age of 16 cannot use the roadways with an e-bike or a human-powered bike without going through some process. If that forces them all to stay on sidewalks or stay on bike paths or stay in rural areas, then that's great, the mission accomplished. But I think as a state, we should make clear that just because they see bicyclists out in the roadway and they're 15 years old, that doesn't mean that they have the right, a legal right, to actually be out in the roads like a regular bicyclist without going through some sort of additional certification, because there is real dangers. And my last comment on Senator Kitchell's point, even if we don't see other states that have done this, e-bikes are new. And I think e-bikes with parents and kids, that's going to motivate them to go even greater distances and greater challenges on roads where they're going to introduce themselves to even more treacherous stretches of highway because they can go further because they have motor ped assisting. So I think this is well worth discussion, especially from a minor perspective, making it clear they're not allowed on our roadways without showing and attesting to a certain degree of competency.
Oh, I hear that. One important clarification: sidewalks are statistically more dangerous than roadways. We do understand that kids do need to be on sidewalks, especially the youngest kids who don't have good control over their bikes. But because there are so many potential conflict points, driveways, parking lots, other roadways, and drivers are not necessarily looking for a person riding a bike on a sidewalk. It's walking infrastructure, so the lines of sight and all that are are designed for pedestrians and not for biking. So when we have kids on sidewalks, we tell them they need to stop at literally every driveway, at every parking lot, and at every curb cut. But again, as you were saying, because there's no universal standard of education.
But those driveways cross the sidewalk to get to the road. So if they're in the road, I would think it's hard to differentiate the danger between.
Yeah, thank you. Really good question. So sidewalks have mailboxes, bushes, other things in between the sidewalk and the road, which can obscure the sight of a person on a bike who is often moving faster than a pedestrian. If you're going to be on a sidewalk and you're on a bike, you need to be going at pedestrian speeds, because the sidewalks, line of sight clearances, all of those things are designed for walking speed, not biking speeds, which is why a sidewalk is more dangerous. It doesn't make sense when you think of it immediately, but then when you realize the things that can get in the way visually on a sidewalk, that is why a vote tends to have more safety aspects on the sidewalk.
Locomotion should be promoting something along the line. I know you're offering courses, but it's not enough. And I just don't understand why, with the movement of the popularity of electric bikes, no one's taken the lead on trying to incorporate them into the traffic without any kind of training at all. It blows my mind to think that you're allowing a bicycle that goes 35 miles an hour into traffic, and yet with no training or no qualifications for the bike itself. And
but I'm back to the.
No,
if that's to happen,
decision, right? No, I understand
it's
that,
on our doorstep. And
well, why aren't they taking the lead? I mean, if it's
so let me address that, Senator Mazza.
Sure. That's good.
I think, as Senator Kitchell and others have said, there are more people on the roads biking now than ever.
Right.
E-bikes are helping to bring people out, but I just want to dispel one notion about them, that they don't go 35 miles an hour. They go at max, if you get a European one, 22 miles an hour, as I understand
20
it.
miles an hour.
All right, but the point is that we should be talking about all bikes, first of all, because I agree with you that I think our goal is to have people safe on the roads on bikes. Will more people be on bikes because of e-bikes? I think different people will be able to bike in a way that they couldn't before. Like, I'm starting to not be able to go up hills on my regular bike, and so I'll probably get an e-bike. but I don't know that it's going to be chaos on the roads. And so what I've said before, I think a way forward here is to, because we do think about this. I mean, we run the biggest program in the state for educating kids right now. When I grew up, I had to take bike ed in school. It was part of the curriculum. I learned how to throw a baseball, which I never really learned how to do, and a football, and I learned how to do this, that, and the other thing. And I also spent a lot of time learning how to bike around on a bike they had all these bikes in a field where I lived. And I learned signals and I learned all those things because everybody did. We don't do that so much anymore. Our program does touch a lot of schools, like Mary Catherine said. Ideally, I would love to see it be the same curriculum as learning how to throw a baseball in school. So that's something that's doable. That's something that we can look at. The other thing I've mentioned before, which I'll mention again, and I've got some people maybe in the House interested in helping with this, is making transportation ed out of what's driver's ed now. So when you're in school, you learn how to drive a car. You don't necessarily learn how to get on a bus or how to bike in the same way. And those are opportunities to educate a lot of people at a certain age when they're sort of open to ways of thinking that they might be more open to learning at that age than others. Because Mary Catherine's right, you learn how to drive a car and you don't actually go through that training again later. So why not put those together? I found when I looked at driver's ed, it's a complex system in the state. I thought there could be some, foolishly thought there could be some legislation that you all could just put in place and it would change the curriculum. It's not, it's kind of a decentralized, it's hard to figure out where the levers are. But that's another area that we could focus on as a state. And I think that would make a difference. It would also make drivers drive more safely around vulnerable users and understand what to do at a crosswalk and whatnot. The other thing that we can do, and we can get back to you on this, is I think we could probably package up some of the options that you've been floating around, what are the solutions? What are other states doing? I've found, I don't think there is a whole lot to look at there, because I think what I found is, like we'll find in the state here, whatever we do touches a certain number of people. It doesn't touch the visitors that come to the state, potentially many visitors coming to the state now because the governor is really focused on recreation and the economy around that. We're gonna have a lot of people here on their bikes, biking around to look at the scenery and all of that. The more that we can put our efforts into better infrastructure for all the things that Mary Catherine and Jonathan have been saying about the queues that are on the road, the separation, the places in that pyramid where you can actually keep people safe, the better. Yes, there's some things we can do around education. I think we can get back to you on some of those so you have a better picture of them. If anybody wants to join me on trying to figure out what to do about driver's ed and turning it transportation ed, give me a call. Like I said, I've got a couple of House members who brought that to my attention before COVID, and I'm going to pick that back up again. And boy, if you want to embed bike education in the schools, Mary Catherine's your person. She works with all the schools. I would love to see that be something that each school has, just like they have soccer nets,
It wouldn't be mandatory. It's still optional. It wouldn't be mandatory. So that doesn't, and let me disagree with you on one thing. Vermont, and I know this because I've been on this committee for my lifetime, no one will challenge any state that we've put more money into bike paths when we build highways and when we put new highway construction and we pave than any state. I'll match that with any state. We are doing our part about bike lanes, and municipalities are when they build a highway or widen a highway to do bike paths. So we are doing our part there. Now, as far as the safety, I haven't heard one thing yet other than optional that you can take a course or maybe they'll offer it in school, but nothing separates the individual, whether they're 12, 13 years old, from getting a bike and going down the middle of the highway along with traffic, not knowing what the rules of the road are. That's my concern. I don't know how better to state that.
And back to the speed of these bikes, I just did a quick search. They're 20 to 45 miles an hour. And in some states, they have class 3 bikes that they only allow ages 17 and up to travel on these bikes. Do we have those rules in the state? that on a class 3 bike that have speeds greater than 28 miles an hour, that somebody of an age group can't use those bikes?
Jonathan, I think you could probably answer this. The state standards that were just, or the state law that was passed, I think last year, is the 3 standards that are out there in the industry. And they do not include the bikes you're describing. You might be describing bikes where people are putting, gas motors or electric motors onto other bikes.
They're electric bikes. I'm looking at it. I'm looking on it online right now.
Jonathan, what's your perspective on it?
Okay, so we in Vermont have 4 classes technically of electric bicycle. Class 1 and 2 are speed limited to 20 miles an hour. Class 2 can have a throttle. Those bikes do not have age restrictions. Class 3 can go up to 28 miles an hour, and you do have to be 16 years old to operate one. We all have a 4th class, which is a motor assisted bicycle, which is capped by power at 1,000 watts. So effectively, you wind up at right around 20 to 28 miles an hour as the actual limit on those bikes.
And that
anything that goes faster than 28 or isn't limited by power to 1,000 watts is not a legal electric bicycle.
Questions, Senator Berkeley?
Yeah, I had a question back on Jonathan's presentation. Just a clarification on this. When you talked about the state standards, even after Senator Kitchell's question, I wasn't sure which standards you were referring to.
Yeah, so VTrans has a big guidance document that they call the Vermont State Standards. So it is confusing because it's a very vague name, but that is the name for AOT's document. I could send it to you if you'd like after this.
Yeah, so send me a link. That would probably be helpful.
Sure.
Let me just say something about the standards. So they were put in place when Brian Searles, who's on our board, was the head of VTrans or DOT at the time, or AOT actually at the time. And they are old. There are these sort of amendments that happened to them that Jonathan was talking about. And also I will say that VTrans would like to update these standards. They've talked about it for a while now. I think it's a big project and I think it takes funding to do it right. So there is inside of across AOT or VTrans, there is an interest in updating them. It's more of a resource issue. So I don't know if that's something that your committee can help move along, but I know that the interest is there because we're falling behind compared to other states who have updated those and they're not 20 some odd years old.
Do you know what division that would be in, Karen?
Boy, I'm going to guess that it would be in engineering, but Jonathan, do you know for sure? Michelle talks about it a lot, but I think it might be housing.
Her planning division.
I would think an update would probably reach across multiple divisions.
And you require it's a big project in the sense you have to have an outside engineering firm work with your folks to make it really work. And there are a lot of really good standards out there in the US that you can use as a starting point. So it's not there's a starting point, let's just say.
Okay.
Questions?
I want to just mention really quick, we do have this bike ped funding program. A lot of municipalities are building bike infrastructure and better walk infrastructure, but it is happening very slowly. And funding is really the limiting factor for our towns. And there is not sufficient funding in the current bike ped program to meet the demand. The funding is about half of what it needs to be to meet the current demand.
Tell me about that. This is grants to the towns or something to put bike lanes in, or?
Yeah, so what I was saying in the presentation is the primary funding source for a lot of municipalities for walk and bike infrastructure is the VTrans Bike and Pedestrian Grant Program. It's typically funded at around $4 million a year, and annual requests are typically around double that, around $8 million a year. And what the result of that is that towns are not able to build a lot of the safe infrastructure that they want to. And they're also oftentimes building infrastructure that is not as high quality as it could be because they're choosing to go with lower quality but less expensive infrastructure. So one of our key recommendations is to increase the funding in that program to meet current demand, allow more projects to be built, and allow projects to be built at a higher quality.
That still doesn't stop the person riding in traffic without any training. That's still an issue that you folks, someone's going to address that sooner or later, whether it's a legislature or you folks, because just building more bike lanes isn't going to solve the problem if they don't have proper training when they get their bike to get on the highways and not just use bike paths, but to use traffic where the traffic goes to. So any other questions or comments this morning?
I just say one thing, Chair.
Go right ahead. Yep.
I think regulating bikes is not far-fetched. We used to have in South Burlington fees. You had to register your bike and that helped pay for more bike paths. So I think looking at standards is a worthwhile and legitimate thing. So I really encourage more of this conversation to make sure our roads are safe for all pedestrians through some standard regulations.
Okay. I think we're going to end this morning, and we've had a good conversation, and maybe we continue this discussion. I want to thank everybody for coming this morning. Appreciate the comments, and we'll certainly continue this discussion at a later time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
We'll follow up with Jeannie with some of the
Thank
things
you.
that it
Okay.
sounded like you needed.
Thank you. Okay. All right, Jeannie, I think you can take us off from live. We're going to go on a break.